What if the life you're living right now already happened before? Not in some vague, poetic way. I mean you specifically. This exact pattern of falling for the same kind of person, losing the same kind of job, feeling the same weight behind your eyes at 2 a.m. What if none of that is random? What if it's not even a curse? What if it's a system built on purpose, and you are inside it right now? I know how that sounds. Stick with me anyway. Almost 2,000 years ago, a group of people came to an uncomfortable conclusion. They looked at the suffering and the repetition of existence, and they didn't accept it as just how life is. They asked a more dangerous question. What if the whole thing is a loop, built to keep you from remembering something you're not meant to remember? They called this loop by different names in different hidden texts, but the shape stayed the same. A soul recycling system. Not made of metal, made of forgetting. I'm not telling you this as a historian reading off a textbook. I've spent a long time sitting with these ideas, and honestly, some of it changed how I look at my own life. I don't even believe every piece of it is literal fact. But underneath the strange language, there's something that feels true in a way that's hard to shake once you've seen it. So here's what we're doing today. How you came here, who built the exact system you're living inside right now, and who, exactly, is recycling you every single time you're sent back into this world. By the end, you're going to look at reincarnation completely differently. Not as something gentle, as something you might need to get out of. Let's start with the feeling. That's where this always starts. It's 3 a.m., and you're staring at the ceiling. The room is quiet enough that you can hear your own heartbeat. And out of nowhere it hits you. Not a thought. A feeling. I have done this before. Not this night. This life. This exact shape of struggle. You can't explain it. And for about 4 seconds, you're completely convinced you're living something you've already lived. Then it passes. You tell yourself it's déjà vu, life moves on. But that feeling doesn't come from nowhere. And I think you already know that, or you wouldn't be watching this video. The people we're talking about today had an answer for it, and it's not comforting in the way spiritual answers usually try to be. They didn't say it's your soul fondly remembering past lives. They said that feeling is a crack, a place where the wall between you and the truth got thin for a second. Underneath the version of you that eats breakfast and pays rent, there's something older. Something that has been through this exact cycle more times than you could count. And every time it comes back, it gets wiped. Almost clean. Almost. That almost is the part that gets me. If the system worked perfectly, you'd never feel that 3 a.m. moment at all. The fact that you do, even for 4 seconds, means the system has a leak in it. I don't think that's an accident. I think that leak might be the whole point. This is where the story stops sounding like fringe belief and starts sounding like people who noticed something real about human experience, then tried to explain it. And that explanation starts with a question most people never ask. If this world is supposed to be a gift, why does it feel so often like a trap you're trying to remember how to escape? Keep that feeling in your chest. We're coming back to it. But first, you need to know who these people actually were. Here's a question worth sitting with. What happens to people who get too close to the truth? That's the short version of who the Gnostics were. Not one organized religion. A scattered network of teachers and small communities across the ancient Mediterranean world, roughly between the 1st and 4th centuries. What tied them together wasn't a shared ritual. It was a shared conviction that salvation didn't come from blind belief. It came from knowledge. Direct, personal, inner knowing. The Greek word for that knowing is gnosis. That idea alone made them dangerous. Not dangerous like criminals. Dangerous like people who threaten a system built on obedience. If truth is something you find inside yourself, you don't need an institution to hand it to you. That's uncomfortable for any structure built on control, and the Gnostics paid for holding it. One of the most important figures here was a teacher named Valentinus. Picture this, a man respected enough that he came within a hair's breadth of being made a bishop in Rome, one of the most powerful religious positions in the ancient world. Instead, his teachings were pushed out as heresy. One decision away, and this becomes central to Western religion instead of buried by it. But it was buried for centuries. Most of what we know about the Gnostics came filtered through their harshest critics. Imagine only knowing someone through the words of their worst enemy. That's what history did to them. Then, in 1945, near a town called Nag Hammadi in Egypt, a farmer digging for fertilizer struck a sealed clay jar buried in the sand. Inside it, over 50 ancient texts hidden away, likely by monks protecting them from destruction, almost 1700 years earlier. Writings in their own words, for the first time in the modern era. A jar in the sand, waiting for the right accident to bring it back into the light. Dig 3 feet to the left, and none of this reaches us. And what was inside that jar didn't read like superstition. It read like a warning. A detailed map of a trap, who built it, who guards it, and why you keep waking up back inside it. So let's meet the architect. Imagine standing outside on a bright day, certain you're looking at the sun. The warmth is real. The light is real. Except it isn't the true source. It's a reflection, a copy, and the real sun exists somewhere you cannot see. That image is basically how the Gnostics describe the God of this material world. Not evil in a cartoonish sense. Just blind. Convinced of his own supremacy, because he's never seen anything higher than himself. They called this figure the Demiurge, a lesser, flawed creator who shapes the physical universe and genuinely believes he is the one true God. Here's the unsettling part. The Demiurge isn't some far-off deity you'll never interact with. He's described as the architect of the rules you live inside right now. Time, scarcity, suffering, forgetting. In this framework, those aren't neutral features of existence. They're structural, load-bearing walls in a prison designed to feel like a home. The Demiurge doesn't run this alone. He has enforcers. The Gnostics called them Archons, meaning rulers. Picture them less like demons with pitchforks and more like cosmic wardens. Their job is maintenance, keeping the walls up, keeping souls asleep, keeping the illusion convincing enough that almost nobody questions it. Here's my honest take, and this is my interpretation, not a claim of literal fact. You don't need to believe in literal beings patrolling the sky to feel the truth underneath this myth. Think about how much of your daily life is built to keep you distracted. Endless notifications, endless small emergencies. A world engineered, by design or by accident, to keep your attention so pinned to survival that you never get the stillness to ask bigger questions. Call that whatever you want. The Gnostics called it Archons. I call it recognizable. None of this happened on purpose, in the sense of some grand evil plan. According to the myth, it started with a mistake. And that mistake belongs to someone whose story might be the most important part of everything we're covering today. Before this material world existed, there was something called the Pleroma, the true fullness, made up of divine beings called eons. One of these eons was named Sophia. Her name means wisdom. Sophia made a mistake. Different texts describe it differently, but the core stays the same. She reached beyond her place, tried to create something on her own, out of a longing to know the source directly. From that reaching, something went wrong. A flawed offspring was produced. That offspring became the Demiurge. Sit with that, because it reframes everything. The architect of this forgetful, painful world isn't a villain plotting your suffering. He's the product of a mistake made out of longing. Wanting too much, too fast, without the full picture. That's such a human thing to happen. Here's where it becomes personal, not just historical. When Sophia's error happened, something of her essence, some fragment of the true divine light, got scattered and trapped inside the material world the Demiurge then built. Trapped inside matter. Trapped inside bodies. Trapped, according to this belief, inside you. That fragment is what Gnostics called the divine spark. This is the piece of the mythology that hits hardest, whether or not you take the rest of it literally. It means that, according to this belief, you are not fully of this place. Something in you has been quietly homesick for somewhere you can't consciously remember your entire life. Doesn't that explain something? That low hum underneath everything, even on your best days. You get the job, the relationship, the life you thought would finally feel like enough. And there's still this quiet ache underneath it, like you're missing something you can't name. The Gnostics would say that ache isn't a flaw in you. It's the divine spark, remembering. Which brings us to the darkest part of this entire teaching. If a piece of you truly belongs somewhere else, why haven't you gone back? The answer is the whole reason this system earned the name it did. Most spiritual traditions treat reincarnation like something gentle. A soul finishing lessons, a patient cycle of growth, life after life, until you graduate into something higher. Some Gnostic sects looked at that same cycle and reached a much more unsettling conclusion. What if reincarnation isn't a classroom? What if it's a holding pattern? In this interpretation, ancient belief, not a claim I'm presenting as fact, the material world is designed to keep the divine spark from ever fully waking up and returning to the Pleroma. Every time a soul gets close to real Gnosis, the system resets it, sends it back in, strips the memory, starts the loop again, not as punishment, as maintenance. The Archons, in some texts, play an active role in that reset, shaping what a soul carries with it as it descends back into a body. This is the actual meaning behind the phrase soul recycling system. Not a peaceful wheel of growth. A closed loop, built to look like growth, while keeping you circling the same distance from the truth, life after life. The first time I really sat with this idea, it made me look at my own life differently. Not hopeless. Almost caught, like noticing for the first time that the hallway you've been walking down your whole life is actually a loop. Same doors, same turns, dressed up slightly differently each time, so you don't notice you've been here before. Think about how many patterns repeat across a single lifetime, let alone the ones this myth claims came before it. The same heartbreak, wearing a different face. The same fear in a new job, a new city, a new decade. If you've ever felt like you're fighting the exact same battle over and over, just with the scenery changed, that's exactly what this teaching describes. Now, I want to push back gently because I don't think every Gnostic sect saw this as pure, hopeless entrapment. Some believed the loop had a weakness, a door, and that door wasn't sealed by some external force you needed permission to open. It was sealed by forgetting, which means it can be opened by remembering. If the trap runs on forgetting, the escape runs on the opposite. Gnosis, direct inner knowing. This is not the same as belief. You can believe in something your entire life and never actually know it the way this teaching describes. Gnosis is closer to that 3 a.m. moment from the start of this video, that flash of undeniable recognition, except cultivated on purpose, until it stops being a flicker and becomes a steady light you can see by. This idea didn't stay buried in ancient texts. It resurfaced centuries later in a completely different field. Carl Jung, a 20th century psychiatrist and one of the founders of modern depth psychology, took these ideas seriously at a time almost nobody else in his profession would. He read the Demiurge and the Archons less as literal beings and more as symbols, deep patterns of the human unconscious describing the psychological journey toward wholeness. In his view, this wasn't fantasy. It was an early map of the inner world, written in the only language available at the time. I find that connection grounding, honestly. You don't have to choose between this is literally true and this is meaningless mythology. There's a third option. This is a description, encoded in myth, of something psychologically and spiritually real, whether it's happening on a cosmic scale or entirely within the architecture of your own mind. So what does Gnosis actually feel like in a normal life? Rarely dramatic. Quieter than that. It's the moment you catch yourself about to repeat an old pattern, and for the first time, you actually see it happening instead of sleepwalking through it. It's choosing stillness over another notification. It's asking the uncomfortable question instead of the easy answer. Every one of those small moments, according to this teaching, is a tiny crack of light getting through the wall. None of this requires you to believe in literal beings patrolling the sky. It just asks you to take seriously the idea that forgetting is the mechanism keeping you stuck, and that paying real attention is the beginning of getting free. Go back to that 3 a.m. moment for a second. The ceiling, the quiet, that flash of certainty that you've lived this before. I don't think that feeling is meaningless anymore, and I don't think you do either, or you wouldn't have made it this far. Whether you take this as ancient cosmic history, or one of the deepest psychological maps humanity has ever written down, the message survives either way. Something in you remembers more than your daily life lets on. The moment you stop scrolling past that feeling and start paying attention, you've already taken the first real step this teaching was pointing toward. This isn't the end of the story. It's barely the beginning. If this pulled you in the way it pulled me in when I first found it, stay a while. Subscribe if you want to go deeper with me. Tell me in the comments, has there ever been a moment in your life that felt like more than deja vu? I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.